How's it going, my solid friends? My name is Gary and this is my channel, Weakest of Weeks. If you're a first time viewer, I appreciate you clicking on the video and definitely consider subscribing. So today's video I'm a little bit disappointed to make, just mainly because it is something that I was hoping I wouldn't have to do because it involves a mistake I made in having to redo something. So let me show you what exactly we're going to be fixing and working on today. If you watched a previous video, and if you haven't, I will link it in the description, but I ended up installing a knockoff Hirsch diffuser on my 08 Aero 9.3, this laser red one, and while it does look rather amazing, I left it this gloss black finish. This one is the fiberglass model, and it works out perfectly, and I think it matches great with the gloss black outer rings of these ice block taillights that are found on the 08 and up new gen 9.3s. Well, one thing I didn't account for is the fact that these tabs up at the top that are supposed to be locking into the original recessed holes here don't actually lock in. So what I've been doing is actually lifting up on this and kind of pushing back a little bit, and then they find their home in there again. So I think what had happened was whenever I installed this, I was pushing down as far as possible because this is bowed a little bit. This is fiberglass, so it's not perfect. And I highly recommend, if you do install one of these knockoff Hirsch models, probably spend the extra money, if they are in fact extra money, for the ABS plastic versions. But this one I pushed down, have a bunch of different bolts going through here. Well, I think because this was bowed, I was putting a lot of pressure downwards on here and forcing it down to kind of straighten out this, and I was relying too much on these to lock in here, which in fact they don't. They're just flat. Well, because of that downward pressure, well, these just pop out really easily, and when I put it back up there, it'll last for a little bit, but then as soon as I hit some bumps, they eventually work their way out. So today the goal is to pull off this rear bumper again, a couple bolts on each side of the rear tire for the wheel liner, some bolts underneath here. A subscriber mentioned on the last video that the clips underneath here you can get out with the taillight still in here, but my fear is just put a screwdriver or trim removal tool in here, break the ice block, or scratch the paint on the bumper here. So here's my Knee Saver 2000, aka a gardening pad that you can get just about anywhere for super cheap, just this foam thing. Highly recommend to buy it, especially if you're working on the concrete. It'll certainly save your knees. Bumper is obviously removed. We need to get this foam piece out of here to give us access to those tabs that we need to refasten. So here is the problem that we are encountering. Here's an up-close look at the tabs on the backside of this rear fascia and what we're working with. And here you have just the flat tabs that are affixed to this knockoff Hirsch diffuser. The original ones have a little small piece that comes out once it goes into this rectangular divot. Pops through here, a little tab comes out and it actually locks it into place. Here you can see on these fiberglass versions, they don't have that. So just simply with movement, it'll kind of do one of those. And what's happening is they're pushing out and creating a gap right there that most people probably won't notice, but since I'm slightly OCD, I absolutely cannot stand it. So I know I can remedy it to some degree. And unfortunately, my first couple options are not going to work. So I have some speed clips I was going to use in some fashion. I was thinking about something like sliding it over here, running a bolt through it, but then that really doesn't get you anywhere. Then I was thinking about using some aluminum channel. I was going to cut this down. Obviously, I'm not going to use this whole thing, but I was pretty much going to do like a 2-inch section of this, literally just like L channel, because this is what I have laying around already. Something similar to this, but this is steel. I wanted to use aluminum and then just cut this down into like 1 or 2-inch sections, something like that. But I wanted to use aluminum so it obviously doesn't rust, and then I could easily cut something like this out of this scrap piece of aluminum. But unfortunately, there's just not a lot of meat left on here, and I'm afraid even if I did that, epoxied it onto here, I'm thinking a bolt could just easily, with vibration, break out of that fiberglass. So I think the only option I have here is to just epoxy over top of all 4 of these exposed tabs. That way I know 100% they're never going to come out. Now, why I originally wanted to bolt this stuff in with, say, like this aluminum channel, a little piece of it, is so that if anything were to happen to this aftermarket diffuser, I can just unbolt it. Everything so far is just bolted into place, so if I wanted to at this point, I can always unbolt this, return it to stock, or if this were to break, just replace it and modify the new one, just like I did this one. But unfortunately, once we glue these tabs in, that's kind of the end of it. But I'm thinking, even then, I can still replace it because I can always grind off any epoxy and then just Dremel a hole in here for new tabs to come through. So it's not the end of the world. It just won't 100% be bolt on and bolt off if I were to need to replace this, but I don't think there's any other solution here. And if you think there is a much better way to do this, by all means, drop a comment down below, but just know that there's not a lot of meat left on these tabs, and they're rather thin fiberglass. So if you run a bolt through here, I think just with some time and vibration, it's going to break these tabs, and you're left with the same exact problem that I'm currently trying to remedy. So now it's just figuring out what epoxy I have here on hand to goop over top of these 4 tabs. Here's what I came up with to refasten these upper tabs, and this is the Sikaflex 221 multi-purpose adhesive and sealant. Now this is something I had left over from refastening the authentic Hirsch spoiler on the same car. Link is in the description if you want to see that video. But this is not the only thing you'll be able to use to fasten these tabs if you're doing this at home. Originally, I was going to use some of this Gorilla Glue epoxy, this 2-part epoxy. This stuff works wonders. If you have a bigger portion of this, it might take 1 full of these, or maybe 1.5 if you plan to really goop these tabs in here. But as you can see, I don't really have a lot of that left, and turns out I have some of the Sikaflex left over from that Hirsch spoiler reinstall. Word to the wise, definitely use latex gloves. This stuff is nasty. So I ended up learning a life hack here. So instead of using this Gojo or this knockoff Permatex, same exact thing, any hand cleaner with a pumice. Well, look at my hands here. This one is actually clean with my little hack. This one, I sat here, tried to scrub it, is a little bit better, but you know what? Don't tell your wife. Use a Scotch-Brite in some warm water and watch this. It'll get this nasty Sikaflex sealant off my fingers way better than that knockoff Permatex Gojo with pumice. Look at that, much better. I've officially gone to great lengths to make sure this fastening process goes exactly the way I want it to. I have 40 pounds of random weights as well as a bunch of just scrap blocks of wood. Now, because the bumper is curved, the centermost portion is touching this old carpet. I have 2 blocks of wood on the outside, the weights pushing everything downward, and then the ground holding up that diffuser. That way I don't permanently glue this into place with that gap that I'm trying to get rid of. So it's not the prettiest thing, but here you can see some of that sealant. It's kind of all in here. So I'm gonna let this dry overnight. It's best this Sikaflex cures at least 24 hours. Technically it's supposed to last longer than that, but it's pretty hot out here, so I think all we need is 24 hours. Been 24 hours, I removed all the weights and the blocks of wood. Here is what it looks like. However, I'm coming to the realization, unfortunately, I'm actually gonna have to clean this stuff up and redo it. If you look closely, there is plenty of flex and movement in here, and that's not what I want. I want it to be rock hard and solid, not moving at all. So I'm afraid this stuff, there's just too much give to it. It's too rubberized. It's very similar to like a liquid nails in a household setting, if anybody's ever used that, where it's very durable and it bonds things really well. However, it doesn't dry rock hard. It allows for expansion and contraction. The Sikaflex is extremely similar, but in this case, that's not what we need because we need it to be a permanent bond, something very secure. So I bit the bullet. I picked up some more of this Gorilla Glue 2-part clear epoxy. Sets in 5 minutes, so I'm gonna goop this stuff on. But unfortunately, I'm gonna have to clean all of this up first before we apply the epoxy. Got that good stuff this go around. Mistakes were made on the first round. Learning my lessons here. Wearing gloves. Using the Gorilla epoxy. Hopefully this is the second and last attempt at securing these tabs. Epoxy has dried over the course of 24 hours, give or take, and it's extremely secure, a lot better shape than the previous thing I used, that Sikaflex. So cosmetically, it looks a lot more worse. However, this is so much more solid. The Sikaflex was very rubbery, definitely allowed for movement that I didn't want, and this being liquidy, it just kind of ran everywhere. But I'm glad that I didn't have the bumper, say it's like this, upwards, because all of that epoxy would have ran down and it would have came out that seam in there, and that would have looked extremely terrible and would have been near impossible to clean up. So this is what we're left with. Now it's time to throw it back onto the car. here's the finalized product. It's not going to look much, if anything, different than the first install. Just know that the tabs are nice and secured. That gap is taken care of, and it's not going to pop the tabs out and create a large gap again that I'm going to have to lift up underneath here to shimmy everything back together just for it to go fall back out within like a day of driving. So unfortunately the car is extremely dirty, so if anything is really visually changed, it's just the fact that the car is extremely dirty, and sadly, it's probably going to be hard to see on camera, but somebody backed into my car. There's also a scratch right here, so fortunately this can probably be buffed out. So definitely need to do some paint correction on this thing. So that is going to wrap it up on today's video. Now I do have a update, actually technically 2 updates outside of finally getting this diffuser back on, fully secured like it should have been. First major update is the simple fact that I sold my 08 93 blue project car that I dubbed Sablutage, thanks to a veteran subscriber who recommended that. This one, the red car, is my sob story. The blue one was Sablutage, but that blue Arrow is now sold. So if the new owner is watching this, I appreciate your time. You definitely seem like a super awesome person, and the car couldn't have went to a better individual. I'll just say that. Now that did make room for this one. So if you haven't really seen much of anything with the blue car, that's mainly because I was trying to buy a 94X, didn't pan out after a couple attempts in a couple different states, and finally I just decided, you know what, I want to go the Volvo route, and that's what I ended up with, my 2015.5 XC60 R Design. So now I'm down to 2 red cars. Maybe I'll get another side project car in the near future. We shall see. But the second big update I can't really show you too much of, but I'll give you a little sneak peek. And it has to do with, gonna go slowly here, some new wheels for my red Arrow. Alright, so I had to hop in the car to do an outro here real quickly, just a little peace and quiet. The neighbor's dog is barking, causing my dogs to bark, and then another neighbor's dog is also barking, so the whole neighborhood is just dogs barking currently. So anyways, so that's gonna wrap it up on today's video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Even though I'm down 1 Saab, doesn't mean the Saab content is gonna stop. There's plenty more updates on this red car. It's kind of my forever project, but I'm perfectly okay with that. So hopefully soon I'll finalize the tune video. This car is finally tuned. This thing rips, but I haven't completed the video on that. And of course, stay tuned for the wheels to see which option I went with. So that being said, I appreciate you watching, making it this far. And any questions, comments, concerns, drop a comment down below, and I'll catch you friends next time.